You're listening to Great Love Media.
The Great Love Debate. It's the Great Love Debate.
The Great Love Debate. It's the Great Love Debate.
Hi again, everyone. It's Brian Howie. Welcome to The Great Love Debate, the world's number one dating and relationship podcast since 2015. Now, I normally don't do one of these episodes right away, but we got so much feedback from our last episode, our annual America's Worst Cities to Find Love for 2020. And if you haven't listened to that episode, do not listen to this episode before you listen to that episode. So hit pause, go back and listen if you haven't listened to it already. If you have listened to it already, thank you. And I had something big and spectacular planned for our first episode of the new year, which this is. And not that this won't be big and spectacular, but I wanted to do this show as a follow-up to that episode because we got buried in comments and complaints and additions and thoughts and all sorts of things. And I got to tell you, you know how we know we really nailed that list, or at least got the 10 cities really right about how wrong they are for dating? Out of the hundreds, literally hundreds of emails and comments on those 10 cities, not one, not a single one was, no, you're wrong. That city's great. No, you guys are mistaken. I live here and it's awesome. No, we didn't get any of those. We didn't even get oh, come on, it's not that bad. And you know why we didn't? Because they are that bad. Every single one of them. So I want to share some of you guys' answers to the worst, the listeners' answers to the worst, because they are fun and they are funny. And I could talk about this shit all day. And sometimes I do. Maybe I should just do a side podcast on the worst because it's a little more fun to do. And sometimes I do talk about this all day, but I'm going to talk about it again this week. I'm going to add on to what we did on the last episode because you guys gave us so much feedback. So the first one I got was from Carolyn in Huntersville, North Carolina, which I know is just outside of Charlotte. And she wrote to us, Brian, every city was bad last year because it was a tough year. Hard to date anywhere with all that is going on. And that is true. I'll grant you that, but not entirely, because there were at least, 100 normal dating days in just about every place in America. And there were certainly opportunities to connect and engage. And if you wanted to, if you want to use the events of the year as an excuse, that's fine. And I get that. But as those events end, and the dust settles, the list is still going to be the same because those 10 cities are still what they are. And the people who live there are still who they are. And if anything, those places have gotten worse and more passive and more lazy and almost assuredly more out of shape. So everyone coming into the new year, everybody's a little bit behind the 8 ball, but those places, those 10 are starting way behind the 8 ball. A much bigger 8 ball, because there are excuses and there are reasons. And COVID was an excuse. The things we laid out about those places, those are reasons. And the reasons are what need to be changed. So until you can attack the reasons, you can't really fall back on the excuse, although we did all have a bit of an excuse, and I will grant you that. The second question that I saw that we got asked was from Debbie, who asked, I'm just curious, when you make these lists, how small do you go on the cities? So I think she meant city size. How small a market do we do? And that's a good question because I'm sure there's some smaller places that absolutely suck. And I will get into that in a second. But my answer is it usually has to be a big enough place that we hit it on our tour because we usually get booked in markets that are at the very least, mid-sized, which I don't necessarily prefer because sometimes the smaller markets are wildly entertaining. It's just that we don't go enough to really get a feel for them. We played a couple shows in Sarasota, Florida in the last year or so. And you probably like, oh, Sarasota's not that small. It's probably like the 15th biggest city in Florida. So it's not really that big either. But the Sarasota shows were some of the best shows we've ever had. And that doesn't mean that I'm sure that Sarasota has a thriving dating scene. It has less than 100,000 people. A lot of those people are elderly. But it does have an international airport. So my initial thought is that's the answer. It has to be a big enough city that it has an international airport. But then I thought about it, and I remember that we had Santa Barbara very, very high on the list a few years ago. Santa Barbara, California, home to the newlywed and the nearly dead. That's Santa Barbara. And it has an absolutely dreadful and dreadfully sleepy dating scene. And we have done shows there, including, and importantly, the very, very first ever Great Love Debate we did in Santa Barbara at the Center Stage Theater, January 14th, 2014. So we're about 7 years as I record this and as you listen to this. And Santa Barbara is not the biggest place, and it does have an airport, but it's not an international airport. So I guess my answer is I don't know how small. I guess it just has to be big enough to have sort of a distinct feel, and you could be like, this is the way dating is here. Santa Barbara has a feel, and it feels awful if you're a single person. I'm telling you, I spent a lot of time there. But I like smaller towns. So to answer your question, I don't think anything is out of the realm of possibility in terms of size we would go. But if you name something that nobody ever heard of, I don't think that's a very interesting list. And we really do study the dynamics of a place. So I wouldn't rule one out in the year ahead that it's like, I was driving through, I don't know, Bend, Oregon, which is growing, but it's still a small place. It probably has a feel because it probably has a certain time. Sedona, Arizona, which I brought up on the last podcast, that has a feel. That's not the biggest place either. I think you can get a handle on sort of the relationship lay of the land there. So that brings me to a slight tangent, a sidebar, or whatever you want to call it, about the smaller markets. And a lot of them didn't make it, but a lot of people think, is it easier or is it harder to date in a big city or a small town? And there are pros and cons to dating in smaller towns. Now, for online dating, it absolutely sucks because the pool is just too small, and you end up scrolling through and you end up seeing too many people that you know, or too many people that you know and you don't want to see them on there. And the geographic parameters that you have to set on the apps, you have to put up like a 90-mile radius to get enough candidates. A few episodes ago, we had Stephanie Llewellyn on here, and she had talked about, on a prior podcast, about she really has to draw a big circle around her on a map to sort of get enough people, to get enough fish in her net to reel somebody in. And that's a challenge. That's a little rough. But here's the upside of small town dating. The upside is you might go to a handful of local hotspots. I hope your town is big enough to have a hotspot, but let's just say a local lukewarm spot. And the upside is you might go to a handful of them and see a person, and then you might go back again in a week or 2 weeks, and you might see them again. And you can kind of build up some momentum, especially if you're shy. If you see somebody who looks familiar, there's a lot better chance you're going to approach them than if it's just cold turkey out of the blue. That's just the way it works. So you might go back and you're like, that guy is here again. Or that girl I talked to last week, she's over there. I like that. In a place like New York City, you see someone once, you don't make your move right there. And it's really hard to make your move right in a moment these days, especially last year. Those people are gone. Like, they're gone. You won't see them again. It's not like in a rom-com where you keep bumping into each other in the middle of Manhattan. It doesn't work that way. But that would happen, or that could happen in a smaller town. You might see some people who are, you're like, they're back in the dating pool, or they just got divorced, or they just broke up, and you might see them at a coffee shop, or have a friend of a friend who knows someone who is now suddenly single. It's easier to network. It's easier to connect face to face. It's easier to find a familiar comfort thing to do together. It's, that's all good. On the other hand, you might run into your exes a lot, or someone you went out with twice and then it didn't click. That's a bit of a problem too. The smaller cities we do for for our Great Love Debate shows, the more there's a situation where the audience, everybody had seen each other on Bumble or Tinder and swiped on each other or didn't call each other back or ghosted each other. That's a lot more likely to happen when we do a show in a smaller market, you know? Or you might run into a situation like I had once back in the day when I lived in Greenwich, Connecticut, which is not exactly the smallest town, but it's a suburb, okay? And it had a very small social circle. And anyway, I ran into a situation where I had either been out with or been home with just about everybody in the bar. And that's really good in your 20s like I was at the time, but at 30 or 40, no. Get out. Get out of the small town. Anyway, back to the responses to last week's list. Kelly with 2 Y's. So I'm not even going to get into that. I don't think she typoed her own name. I think she really spells Kelly with 2 Y's and 2 E's. So do whatever you like with that information. Anyway, Kelly sent in, any list without Jacksonville on it is not a serious list. And that's an excellent one. We only picked 10, so we couldn't include everyone. You heard what we said about San Jose. That was 11. Jacksonville is way up there too. You're right. Jacksonville is everything bad about Florida with none of the good. The beach is really, really far from the city. You think, oh, Jacksonville's on the coast. It's really not. The beach is a hike. There's this river running through the city that has kind of a funky smell to it. The weather is oddly sketchy. It's another place with nowhere to go, nothing to do, and nobody to do it with. It just sucks. But sorry, Kelly with 2 Y's and 2 E's. We already had some Florida on the list. We already had quite a bit of Florida on the list. It's the same Atlantic coast. But you're right. Jacksonville sucks. Daytona sucks. Palm Beach sucks. Boca Raton, Fort Lauderdale, all the way down to Miami. Let's just say the entire stretch of I-95 from Savannah, Georgia, down to Homestead, Florida, sucks for dating. Because it does. It's a lovely part of the world. It's a beautiful place. A lot of nice little cities, a lot of little islands off that coast there. But for dating and relationships, it sucks. Except Delray Beach. Delray Beach is a little slice of dating heaven because I love it there. But anyway, there are exceptions, but we deal in generalities around here. So generally speaking, the Atlantic side of Florida sucks to be single. So yes, you're in Jacksonville. You're on the list as like 12, 13. You're on there. So good one. Good submission, Kelly. And that's got to be a problem for you. If he spells your name wrong and you spell your name unusually, is that a problem? Is that a deal breaker for you? I think you have to have a little bit of wiggle room if somebody spells your name wrong, if you spell your name wrong. Okay? Kelly, sorry. Another submission we got was from Travis. And he wrote, I still feel like Dallas should have been one of the worst cities for dating. Too many clicks go to the local bar, restaurants. Also, crime rate has been going up, and it's bad here lately. I don't get into the crime stats too much. Also, women, they are beautiful here, but sometimes seem very standoffish, antisocial here to the extreme. Every now and then you meet women visiting Dallas that you may random meet that are social and friendly, but other times, no. Yeah, the state fair is here in the fall, but I still feel Dallas isn't so great. It maybe is not top 10, but at least top 20 worst. Travis, bite your tongue. Shut your mouth, Travis. We have named the women of Dallas as America's most dateable 3 years in a row. And they are so above and beyond the best that we don't even make that list anymore because it got boring. Like, we didn't have any competition for the top spot because the women of Dallas win. They are permanently the best. Big hair, big energy, big personality, big fun, all of it. They are Texas in all the good ways. The best. They are up for everything. You just have to step up. So don't make me come down there, Travis. I already come down there plenty. We do the show there a lot. Dallas women rock. Has Dallas been on this list a couple times before? It has, and it has because of the men. The all hat, no cattle, that's a real thing down there. So you and all the rest of you North Texas boys, you need to step it up and make it happen. The women are ready and willing and able, and you just have to be the one to catch their interest. So you might have to crack that clique that they go out in, Plenty of cities, the women put the bar way too high and the guys have no chance. That isn't Dallas. They